Okay, people, I have a good one this week. This week I got it on Kindle. That's not the picture. That's just an ad. I got it on Kindle. It's The House of the Wolfings. And just to tell you, just a quick, so you get a sense of what this book is. The full title, A Tale of the House of the Wolfings and All the Kindreds of the Mark, written in prose and verse by William Morris. All right, it's going to be one of those types. So, you know, get ready. Okay, for obviously, I always forget to do this, but spoiler warning: I'm gonna spoil this book. I'm gonna yap about it, spoil it. First off, cost. This one is free. It's one of those in the public domain because it's old enough. I forget how old it is. I forget when he wrote it. I should have looked. But it's 100% free. Now, if you actually wanted to buy a copy, I mean, good luck. I think some people out there are selling them, but it's I don't think it's any of the big publishers, right? It's not like Penguin or something like this. So you're not going to get, at least I didn't see these big fancy versions of it. I can sort of see why. It's short and it's difficult. Why did I get it, even for free? Why did I find it out of the ether? I read somewhere, I think it was in some forum, and somebody was like, "This is the books that inspired Tolkien," and I'm all about Tolkien. So I'm like, "Well, what is this mess?" And so I go and I look and I find them, and it's been a complete, utter joy, an absolute joy. Not just this book, all of his books. I'm probably gonna at some point, go through each of them. That's also why you'll find these in the Tolkien category on ye old YouTube channel because I'm going to tie it all in, at least in my head. Okay, so that's the other thing. I'm going to lay the groundwork here. And I'll repeat this later as I go. There's two things going on here. One is what's actually written, right? It's just the story that's there. The other is what I like to call head canon. This is connections I'm making in my own brain. Not related to anything the author did. And you can say, well, you're overblowing it because of these connections. But I think if you look, it'll hold up either way. Obviously, I enjoy it more because of these made up connections in my mind. But it's still highly enjoyable if you just read the text as is. If you don't know, like, I'm not into Tolkien, I don't read Tolkien, but this I like. You could, that can happen, right? It's not like dependent on Tolkien. So the rating, right? This is 100% a 4 out of 5. Okay, and in the four, I suggest anyone who considers themselves a reader, anyone who loves to read books, to give this one, go read this one. Now, I will warn you, you got to be a big time reader, okay? This is not for casuals. Casuals need not apply. We're going to have dense, meaty language here. That it's not easy to read, let's say, compared to other things. Especially if you're just into modern books, only read YA or something like this. I would wait until you're more tenured a reader, right? If you're just a rank casual and you know this about yourself, I'd avoid it completely. You won't. I don't think you'll get anything out of it. But if you're a real big time reader, this is what you do. This is what you like. 100% I think you'll like this. I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay. So, an overarching sort of theory, right? And then it will tie in as we go. Tolkien, admittedly from himself, from letters of Tolkien, says that he wanted to make a mythology for England, right? Did I bump this? Is that going to ruin the video? He wanted mythology for England, right? So, it's a history, right? Well, in that, there's other things that happened, right? So, you can read this and kind of all of William Morris's books, essentially, as part of the big overall timeline, right? So, if this book happened here and then later we get to Winston Churchill, then way before here is Aragorn, way back in the distant past, because in his book we talk about the creation of the universe and the first peoples ever waking up, right? So there's this, it fits in this overall timeline, right? So you'll see people mention like this is the king, this is a chief, this is this or that, special individuals. If you could close your eyes and go, that's sort of the lineage of Aragorn. And then it starts to make a freaky kind of sense. Now, we're not going to have like one to one, right? I'm not saying. Nowhere does this author say it, nowhere does Tolkien say it. This is one to one, this history or that history. So don't get that twisted. But it's impossible not to see there's going to be some names, but there's similarities in sort of style, right? Like that car kind of looks like a Ferrari, right? Two buildings that kind of look the same. You start to think about the architect, and then he would tell you, no, it's not. It's I was inspired by such and such other architect, and then you start seeing these lines, right, where it's not blatant, but it is there. It is there if you can see it. Okay, so the book itself, but before we get into it, I have to tell you a little bit about sort of writing in general, because it leads to why this book's enjoyable. In any field, there are, what the word I use? There's sort of like a lineage, right? So if you listen to music from the 40s, and you keep listening through the decades, you'll see sort of things get pulled out of one decade, put into the other decade, and then new added to it, right? We went from big band era to lead singers to remove the band and add just a guitar. There's these breakdowns that happen, and those happen in writing as well. So, our writing essentially are Western, I would say. I haven't gotten as much into Asian yet. They have different classics. Ours essentially came from, let's say, the Bible, Latin, and then sort of French, German, British, right? That's sort of the breakdown. And the Bible is written a certain way, right? And so when other writers of that time would write something, it follows because they were educated off of the Bible. Monks, this and that, princes, dukes, these sort of people. So it gives, let's say, the ancient world a feel in the dictation, a feel in the cadence of the writing, right? That without, you lose something, or you have a hole that needs to be covered. That's what some authors do. I'm going to play with the writing a little bit. Now, I'm sure in real life, everyone didn't speak the way they spoke in these writings because they were common people. There's always common slang. But these educated people, and I'm talking way back in the day, would not write the slang, right? Because paper's expensive, ink is expensive, time is expensive. There aren't many people who have the free time to sit around just to write stuff, right? So they take it very serious, as do the people reading it. I'm going to give it to the Duke of this, the Lord of that, the King of such and such, right? But what survived isn't the words, because those people died. They're just in the air. What survived is the writing itself, right? So he, my boy William Morris, is skilled enough as a writer to take those cadences and in imbue his writing with that all throughout, from beginning to end. Uh, yeah, from beginning to end, he does this. A little example. Let me see. I think I wrote it down, and I'm gonna, I guess, break down little bits of this. Anyhow, they came adown the river on its waters on rafts, by its shores in wains, or bestriding their horses or their kine, or afoot, till they had mind to abide. And there, as it fell, they stayed their travels, and spread from each side of the river, and fought with the wood and its wild things, that they might take to themselves a dwelling place on the face of the earth. Right? That face of the earth bit clearly feels biblical. And I'm not talking, before people get twisted, because it's the internet, I'm not talking the Bible religiously. I'm talking in a sense as literature, right? You just plug that in your brain. But, obviously, adown the river, bestriding, right? These are old-timey sort of words. But then when he uses like stayed their travel, the taking the time to describe each of the ways they would travel, right? On their kine, on their wains, on foot, on this and that side of the river. This is old, ancient style of writing. For whatever reason, I don't know why. They would, it's like we in modern writing say you just went down to the woods, you know, because the woods aren't all encompassing for us. This is more encompassing for our characters, and so it can carry this extra descriptors. But these long-winded, let's say, descriptors of things start to give the reader that feel, that ancient feel, already to begin with. Now, if you're not good enough of a writer and you start this and you drop it, you failed, right? Because then it's kicking me out of a thing I was in. But he is a good enough writer, and he carries this all the way through his book. Now, you would think, and this is what I thought when I was younger, right? I think when I was very young, I would try and read like the Iliad or something. And I'm like, this is boring. Do the thing already, right? I just want to. Why don't you kill a goblin or something? Why don't we have a fireball? You're impatient when you're young, right? When you're more experienced, you start to see what's happening. You get pulled out of your world into theirs, right? And then once you're in theirs, if the writer's good enough, you're carried along with them. So, despite feeling slow, it goes very quickly because he doesn't waste any of the time that he's given. He will describe something as like, okay, they settled on the east and the west. Now, if I just say it that way, it's just directions. But when he writes it, he'll capitalize west and he'll capitalize east, so that now I know that to these people in lore, that's the same as if I said Brooklyn to someone from New York. It means an entire thing, right? This is an example of what he does to move this thing along. I think page 1 or 2, we get your first clue. If you are the Tolkienite that I am, the first clue. They're literally in the woods that they're in. Okay, they're the woodland people. They split off along this river, and they make little encampments. The river, they literally call it Mirkwood. They literally call it the Mirkwood. I'm like, yeah. The river running it is the Mirkwood water. You know, that's not. But then he breaks the people up into groups, and each group calls themselves mid mark, upper mark, nether mark. And if you're not thinking of the Riders of Rohan every time I say each of those, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Riders of the Mark, you know what I mean? And it's you can't help but think of Lord of the Rings when you read it. And again, not in the sense that he pulled directly, right? But it's close enough that it gives it that history, that like it feeds both Tolkien and this work at the same time. It's I can't get enough of it. And again, I say these are little tidbits you pick up in amongst all of this other great writing. So, if you just want to exclude my little head canon, it's still 100% wonderful. He takes a good chunk of time describing the building of a large house. You know, like we all live in the ancient hall, so to speak. It's just a big long house and they all live in it. But he makes it more than that. And how he does it is he goes, the kindred dwelt under one roof together and had therein their place and dignity. And just with one word, just with dignity, he completely shifts the whole perspective of the story. What do I mean? When we talk ancient times, right? People who wear furs, who fight with swords and bows and arrows, who don't have cars, they ride around on horses if they can get them. Armies will just run up on each other and stab each other, right? Thatched roofs. This sort of situation. It's hard sometimes for readers not to see them as primitive people, right? Savages. But if you use the word dignity, that's incongruent with savage. Savages don't have dignity, right? It's a higher level thinking. And it adds a regalness to the whole story that I wasn't expecting, right? You expect people who wear sandals and are farmers and worship pagan gods or whatever to be savages. And to give them a regal feel makes the whole book sit different with the reader. And again, his skill doesn't lose it. So you'll finish reading this, and then you, in your mind, you can compare this guy, this character, to the kings of England and Aragorn and the kings of Arnor and Gondor, right? Just eye level. Different times existed, not knowing each other, eye level with each other, because they carry themselves appropriately. And it doesn't dip. It doesn't dip for 1 second. And it's harder to find than you realize. You read a lot of these fantasy books, and they lose this element. It's a very important element. And even important for people in lore, because your common man in those times would just do what he does. I'm just going to try and farm and not freeze to death in the winter, right? He has no concept of anything happening past him. Not much different than today, honestly. So they would rely on their leaders to, if they need to go to war, to tell them, to get them ready, and then to lead that war to some sort of success, right? We have something from the Oracle that says we're going to have a hard winter. They rely on their leaders to sort of tell them to save more or grow more or whatever, right? So it's twofold. It's not, again, it's quick. So just as you're starting to absorb this wonderful language, these descriptors, that you're settling into their world, he hits you. In the Great Hall, hanging by these big chains, is a great green sort of a lantern made of glass that they constantly keep it a flame in it, right? So you already know some kind of thing for these people. But in the way he describes it, and then when he actually sort of tells you that it's an ancient and holy thing, and none of them could make it if they had to. And so now your mind's instantly about this weird, there's a mystical element to it, right? He introduces it without losing realism, because you're wondering about this thing. Where did it come from? What's going on here? Right? And then if you're like me with the Tolkien, you're like, bro, elves made the map. Right? It came from Numenor or some crap. So it fits both ways. It really, really does. Now again, he doesn't say that. It's all in my head. But it adds this mystical element to what you're reading. Their chief, he calls him a chief, is Theodulf. I think that it describes it as folk wolf, which is also another thing Tolkien does, right? Names mean things, which isn't, a lot of writers do that, so you can't say that's just Tolkien. But add it to Mirkwood, add it to Mark, and it starts to be more than a coincidence. Also, his name, when I just look at it visually, Theodulf, it reminds me of Thorin. Right? I'm not saying, again, not one to one, but, both cakes have cinnamon in them, so to speak. Right? I think it's there. Now, they're in the hall, they're going to eat. Well, the whole lot of them go in to eat. Their slaves included, which they call thralls. It's an ancient, old-timey word. I like it. And here it gets even meatier. And here's the main reason why I say this is for expert readers only, because this language can throw a lot of people. A guy comes in, and what does he say? Let me just read it. Now this is our Theodulf talking. As soon as he comes in, and he describes it as rhyme talk, kind of. Welcome, thou evening farer, and holy be thine head, since thou hast sought unto us in the heart of the Wolfing stead. Drink now of the horn of the mighty, and call a health to it thou wilt. O'er the eddies of the mead horn to the washing out of guilt. For thou comest to the peace of the Wolfings, and our very guest thou art. And meseems as I behold thee, that I look on a child of the heart. Right? And the man replies to him in also that rhyme. Very, to me, delicious writing, right? But the thou and the though and the thou art, this and that, right? They carry on talking like this. But they don't always rhyme it, right? And so what our author's done is giving us, what did we say? Officialness, right? When you come to speak to, right, the Queen of England or the President or something, you'll say, Mr. President, and you'll lay out your case. You're not jabber-jawing like you would a random person on an elevator. You're not dealing with a random person on an elevator. You're dealing with the leader of the free world. Man's busy. Get to the point, right? So there's a way you talk, an official way. Now, we're not too traditional with it in America. England would be worse. Cut back 200 years, it's even worse. There's all sorts of procedure that goes involved with talking and dealing with leaders, right? And so the fact that he adds this separation, this delineation between how they talk to each other, which is still the thou and the thou, but he doesn't rhyme it, to how he talks when it's official, he's giving me more depth in their society just with the words that they're speaking, right? It's wonderfully done. It's wonderfully done. And it's difficult, I would imagine, to do. He has that kind of mastery over the language that he's dealing with. Absolutely wonderful. And again, and none of the things that I'm saying does he ever drop in any sense. There's no point, there's not a crack here where you feel, there's no boom mic that comes to break the verisimilitude, right? The magic that you're making as you read. Not a second, not a word is off to me. He then goes out walking in the woods. And even this, he can add a mystical element to it. What? Though it might scarce be told whether that light were the memory of yesterday or the promise of tomorrow, since little of the heavens could be seen thence, save the crown of them. Right? It's just beautiful language, but each step is something towards mystical. I feel it even as he's walking, even though he doesn't say it, just describing the trees and the woods. And he meets someone in the woods. They call her Wood Sun. Just Wood dash Sun, both capitalized. That's it. Simple name. And they appear to it's a beautiful woman. And again, you don't walk in the woods at night at twilight with this kind of ethereal language and think this is a normal, beautiful woman, right? Clearly something about her. And again, if he was just a soldier, it wouldn't work. Because the levels wouldn't be right, right? This sort of thing doesn't happen to just soldiers. They live normal lives. This happens to royalty. So if you didn't build up that he's royal in nature, then he couldn't have and hold these conversations with this, what they call, daughter of the gods. This Wood Sun. Which, again, in my head canon, could be an elf. It fits if you read it. But if you're not doing the head canon, a daughter of the gods, still not like a human. So you don't know what can happen. They do more. As they're talking, you see that they have a relationship, right? In love. And in the midst of this, he starts singing. That's what they say. He sings out. And then it's more of this more beautiful language. It's very beautiful. Beautifully written. But that song, that you're talking in song to this daughter of the gods. Again, it reminds me of Tolkien. Because a lot of his mythology is built off of music. Music created the world of Tolkien, right? So that song and music and rhyme would still have some effect here, right? Because he likes sort of a degradation. So the music's never as good as the gods, obviously. Then the elves sing better. And then no man can sing better than Numenorians, who don't sing better than elves. Obviously, you know what I'm saying. So that it would trickle down and pop up in this person with this sort of a royal blood. Works. It works on the whole arc of the Tolkienness. She tells him he's not a Wolfing, as in the people we're dealing with. He's not too happy about it, but he takes it, right? What can he do about it? But it adds to the kingship. He's this thing above. That's what she says. You're not of them. You're higher than them. And of course, he holds himself as one of the people. But you always add this element in royalty. And it in those old times too, it seemed like that's how people wanted it dealt with. On the one side, you're a duke or a king of, king of Brandenburg or something like this. Yeah, you get all this money. Yeah, you live this nice life. Now you don't have to live in the cold. But what you have to do is go over there and deal with, that uprising. You have to go deal with that war, so that I can just stay home and farm. Right? It's like a trade-off. It's the deal we made. So they have to deal with these things. So in a fantasy type of story, you have to give him something to be able to deal eye to eye with this daughter of the gods. And he does that. So she's also saying, right, she come to warn him. She sees the future or something, and a powerful enemy's coming, and he's going to die. She's not happy about it. She's sad. Right? But your boy's a Giga Chad, so he takes it like, if I die, I die. Ain't nothing but a thing. They'll sing glorious about me. There's no better way for a man to go. I love you. I love life. But if I got to go, I got to go. Right? Giga Chad. But she then, and they describe it like she just reaches into the grass and pulls the thing out, mystically. She didn't cast a spell or anything. She's just, he didn't mention seeing it. He just walks up on the grass, and then she's mid-talking. She pulls this thing out of the grass. It's a dwarf, what do they call it? Harbuk. Hauberk? Hauberk? I don't know how to say that word. Hold on. Sorry about that. Dwarf Hauberk, right? Which is just when you see in the old movies and they put this shirt made out of chainmail on, that's the Harbuk. Harbuk. I don't know how to say the word. Hauberk, I think. Hauberk, right? And they say it's a work of the dwarves. And again, right? You just banging a gong for your boy. I'm like, bro, they're literally dwarves in Lord of the Rings. I'm freaking out. So I'm like instantly mystical. Instantly I'm like, I don't know what the crap this enemy's going to be. My head sort of flies off the handle a little bit. But he looks at it. And then he's like, what does he say? And all we fear the dwarfkin and their anger and their sorrow and their mirth. And I'm like, that's just a great way to explain dwarves. Even in Tolkien lore, elves and men, right, they just sort of get along because they have this, because they're elves and pretentious. Yeah, I said it. They have this sort of, I'm better than you, you're down here mentality. And men are okay with that. Yeah, he's a great elf. Look how pretty he is. We'll listen to what he says. Perfect relationship. Dwarves and men are more, I think, eye to eye, right? And so to me, this is a perfect description. Even in this, again, fits with Tolkien and works in lore. To imagine to be afraid of their anger, their sorrow, and their mirth. And I'm like, even when he's joking, it doesn't go good for me. It's a problem. We also learn, right? So she wants him to have this for the war, obviously. He's not sure about it. We find out that his daughter is named Hallsun. Obviously, daughter of this daughter of a daughter of the gods, right? So even sort of she's now mystical. Again, royal lineages are better than yours, right? They get extra perks. And we literally see her at one point sitting on a green hill having visions that she's having trouble, putting into words. Just, I don't know, some kind of visions are coming at her. And I'm like, the way he interweaves the mystical elements in this book again, you have to go experience it. You have to go read this book. It's free, people. It's free. But the fact that he uses, again, more Tolkien connections to me. A green hill. Now, you don't think, I'm like, bro, you're grabbing at straws. I'm like, I'm not. Because, Lothlorien is founded on a particular hill. So is Dol Guldur on an opposite hill. They're staring at each other. And then we have various, I think one's called the Seat of Seeing. Amon Hen. I think that's the name. God. Aragorn wants to go sit in this seat and look around. It was built by the Númenóreans on this sort of particular hill for its magical properties, right? So that you can sit on it and see visions maybe of the future, maybe of your enemy, maybe of whatever it wants to show you. There's another one of hearing, I believe. Right? So, again, from Aragorn's time down to whenever this is, which by the writing of it is way away, but they still talk about dwarves, so it's not that far. Right? It's not modern. The delineation would work out that these people are no longer picking the hill. It's just coincidentally put their city on a hill. Coincidentally having conversations, important conversations on these hills, right? So it all ties together. It really does. He goes on long descriptions of how they would group up, right? Of what all that meant. It's not just let's go to town and talk. It's not a town hall meeting. It's you're leaving behind lots of work that needs to be done daily to go converse about, visions or this war arrow or whatever. So he wanted to do is produces a war arrow too. Again, Rohan. Come on, people. We get some words. First off, we find out they're going to be fighting Romans, right? So in our head, we can sort of put it in a spot. But they also talk about Huns, Franks, Burgundians. So, like, they could be Germanic. But then they also say they fought Welshmen, so maybe they're like somewhere in England, and these other people have come over the sea and fought them, right? It could be either or. And now we don't know specifically where our boy Theodulf is from, right? And clearly Tolkien's work is European and British in nature, right? So at some point, some of the history has to get to England. And I'm like, I could see it working. I could see it getting there through this story, right? Like if you sat it right in the timeline, I think it could carry its weight. There's a lot of to do, right? And again, this is fun to actually read. But in history, you read a lot about battles. Just the battle happened and then, old Longshanks becomes King of England, right? But here we get, let's say, instead of a bird's eye view, a first person view. And you don't get that a lot. To get descriptions of how we're going to move across through the woods, where we might fight this enemy, these Romans, how they might fight, scouts, army movements, take yourself some food and some water in case you need to eat along the way, indecision amongst the commanders on both sides, before and after battles, how we'll set up each fight, what I'm going to look for when it starts to go down. All of these things, all of the nuance of a war in sort of medieval times, just laid out in this beautiful language. I can't think of many other books that can give that to you, right? That experience. I can get you to space, right? I can get you to fight dragons or demons or vampires, but I don't know many books, if any, that can give you this kind of feeling. The feel, not just the descriptions, not just they move this way, but the feel of it for these people. Almost on that alone, it'd be worth it. Okay, our boy, he's such a Giga Chad. Even though he says to her that he would wear it, he completely forgets about this dwarf armor that make him impervious in battle. while he's going to go fight some Romans. He's like, yeah, I forgot. Giga Chad. He sends a guy back to get it, his gear. And like the lady's there in disguise. Sort of tricks the guy into taking the dwarf stuff to him. Right? So she's trying to work the angle. She's trying not to get him dead. She really loves him. So what is it about this armor? What's up with it? Well, what's up with it is it's cursed. Obviously. Oh, God. Oh, God, what have I done? Is that back? My deadliest nemesis, this cord, right? Messed up my other headphones. Catching the cord with my foot one time. Not on the iPad. Bending it. So terrible. I gotta stop doing it. Dwarf armor. It's cursed. He'll put it on and he won't die. He can't be killed in battle. I'm like, that's great. I'll take it. Here's what happens. Like he runs into the battle, gung ho, and then just, they say swoons, like just falls out, passes out, right on the ground. And half of them think, bro, took an arrow or something, we're in trouble. Right? It affects the other guys. They drag him out. He's fine. He wakes up after the battle, like, what happened? They're like, bro, you went to sleep. And he's like, it's shameful. What kind of a man didn't go in and fight? Now, they don't want to say it because they respect him, but they're looking at him sideways. And he has some conversations with his girl, his lady Woodson, right? And eventually he gets it out of her. Again, a long time ago, there was another lady who loved another guy who was going to go into battle. And again, that this is sort of like a romance story. This man and this being fits with Tolkien because he likes, what is it? Beren and Luthien, a man and an elf. Aragorn, Arwen, a man and an elf, right? And if you see these as elves, it works. And if you don't, the archetype is still there. A mortal man with this higher being that they love each other, right? The archetype is still there. And it's in this twice because this armor comes from the same archetype, I think. This lady loves this guy, doesn't want him to die, right? So a dwarf lord comes to her with a proposition, right? He's like, I can make it so your boy don't die. Just give me some of that. Just give me some of that sexy time. He gives her the eyebrows, right? The old eyebrows. And she says she'll do it, but then when they get to his room, so to speak, she gets like a sleep thorn, paralyzes him. Can't do jack squat now. She wasn't gonna be with no dirty dwarf. He's dirty. And again, it's the dwarfs. The dwarves aren't dirty. That dwarf is. It's a thin line, but important. This is a story from men's perspective, and that's how they see it. They judge you individually. If the elves had written this, all dwarves would be dirty, right? Obviously, because they're biased. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it some more. Right? But it makes the point that he is this way, not all of them. Which is subtle but important. It gives it this realism. Right, so she takes the armor and gives it to her guy. Now he's mad, but he's paralyzed. He can't move. And even if he could, he knows. He goes, "You're a daughter of the gods, and I can't attack the gods. They won't let you be attacked." He knows this, right? So he can't kill her, which he would if he could. Stole from him, reneged on the deal, dirty as it is in his eyes. So he can't kill her. He also can't undo what he built in the Harburg. Harburg. It's going to make that boy invincible. She'll get what she wants. What he does then is he curses the armor. It says, what does it say? Did I write it down? Did I not write this down? Oh, he goes, the wearer lives, cannot be killed, but always loses the battle. What they say, the quote is, carries the battle's shame. Right? So if you're sitting here and your countrymen are going to fight, you're going to lose every fight, even though you live. And you have to walk back and continue watching the ruination of everything you're fighting for. Or not fight, which would be shameful. If you're a healthy male in those times, he can't live with the shame of it, right? Which is what ends up happening to our boy, Theodulf. Once he understands what it is, he can't. He's like, I won't. I'm not going to sacrifice. What is it? It's like the salvation of one man is the sacrifice of a people, right? He's not going to sacrifice the people, even if they aren't his people. So he just takes that thing off in the fight against the Romans, right? The Romans come around the woods. They take the big house that we talked about. They're holed up inside because it's a defendable position. Because he's a Roman captain and he's not trying to die to no savages, as he sees them. Book literally says that, as he sees them. And they're like, well, burn them out. So there's a big, big fight. Again, fun to read. What we end up with is our boy Theodulf, after literally a day of fighting, swinging a sword, untouched. Untouched with no armor on, essentially. Not the dwarf armor, at least. Not the one that makes him invincible. Just swinging away like everyone else. His sword got lost. Another one got broke. He got a Roman sword, and he's in the burning building fighting a Roman captain. And that captain's like, I'm not trying to go down easy. He still thinks he can win, but he's also experienced. If you know anything about Roman history, professional soldiers knew how to fight. They go at it. They fight in a burning building, and he ends up, beating the Roman. And then he sits down in the burning building in his high seat, tells him, start working on taking the fire out. We did it. And he looks pale and tired. So one of the guys is like, I'll go get you some water. When he comes back, slips in some blood, realizes boy got stuck at some point by the Roman captain. And then he tries to shake him, but it's into the line. They're putting the fire out. Building's going to be saved. The people will be saved. They're not going to be enslaved by Romans. But your boy went down. The prophecy was right. And now the wood lady, what's her name? Bugger. Our wood son, she had been telling him before, and again, another thing that makes me think elf, that, he has her heart. And when he dies, she'll die. Not that she's going to just grow old and die, but these elves love to die of a broken heart. Sort of fits. It actually fits. Now another element he does that gives it that feel that Tolkien carries, right? Two good writers it takes to do this. The movie, right, in your mind would end there with your hero dying heroically and then everyone's going to live and we're sort of sad about it. It's not where the book ends. The book has a wind down that sort of reminds me of Tolkien as well. He goes on to describe how they would mourn, how they carried him from the place to this other field of honor. The whole 9 yards, right? The whole 9 yards of how these people would probably have mourned one of their fallen chiefs, right? And again, you've heard the descriptions of, let's say, pagans and how they would do their ceremonies, but this gets you to, like, let's say, live it. You get to be inside of the ceremony. Not a lot of books doing this. Not a lot of books that I've ever read that I know of. If you know of some, put them down. I'll check them out. But that's what he does. And that's how our story ends, right? With this tapering down. After these mourning and these speeches for the dead and all this and that, it tapers down. And truly, truly a great book. It's not long either. All right. ad time, right? This book is 100% worth it. At the price, which is free, you should absolutely read it. Even if you don't, like I said, even if you don't do all the head canon that I do. I can't help myself though, right? If you name a place Mirkwood, you know, and it's almost the way you have to see it. Tolkien is too good of a writer. He's too good of a writer. He would know that I, the reader, if I ever read this book and saw Mirkwood, that I would think of his book. He's too good a writer not to know this, right? So it's almost like I'm following the author's intent without him saying it. He's told me almost by his actions, unwritten, to look at this book a little differently. Let it go in your brain. Let these things happen. I don't know how long I spent reading all these William Morris books, but I carried this thought through the whole of them, and it holds up. But again, even without that head canon, even without the Tolkien element, this is one of the. I guess the language is so pretty. It's just so pretty. You could just sit in it all day. Check this book out if you haven't. Buy my books if you haven't. Yeah, okay. I think that's long enough. Have fun. Enjoy the rest of your day. Your boy's out.